But I want to introduce to you our guest speaker for today, Dr. Marguerite Matthews. Dr. Matthews, PhD, is a 2016-2018 AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the National Institutes of Health in the Division of Biomedical Research, Workforce, and Division of Loan Repayment within the Office of Extramural Programs, in the Office of Extramural Research, in the Office of the Director. That's complicated. She's very important. As a fellow at NIH, Dr. Matthews is focused on outcome-based research to inform biomedical research, workforce policy, and program evaluation enhancement. She has a strong interest in increasing underrepresented minorities in the STEM workforce, and works with various programs aimed at increasing access to opportunities for youth and young adults. Dr. Matthews received a BS in Biochemistry from Spelman College and a PhD in Neuroscience from the University of Pittsburgh, where she characterized the development of the dopamine reward system in an adolescent animal model. She completed her postdoctoral training at Oregon Health and Science University in Behavioral Neuroscience, studying typical and atypical brain organization in babies and children. And she is our guest speaker today. I'm so excited to have her here as part of the project. And I'm going to turn this time over to her. So a warm welcome to Dr. Matthews.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. Even if it's just to grab a bite to eat, I appreciate you staying to listen. I'm curious, what are you all here for? What are you hoping to get? Be it out of the series, possibly my talk specifically. Anybody want to share what they're hoping to hear about or what they have questions about? I kind of like to get a feel of where folks are before I start speaking, because I want to speak to you, to the audience, and not just tell you what I think you want to hear. So, does anybody want to share? Sure. Entrepreneurship, okay. Anybody else? Okay, so who in here is an undergraduate? Okay. And who's in grad school? The rest? And are you guys in master's programs? Yes, master's programs? Thinking about doing a PhD? No? Okay.
It'll be a while.
So part of the reason I entitled my talk, The Fire Festival, is because even now, many years after I received my PhD, it felt like a scam. And when someone asks me if I think that they should go on to get a doctorate, I usually say no, don't do it. Turn back. You will be bamboozled. Feel hustled. All the adjectives that John Rowland used to describe his involvement in the Fire Festival. And it does sometimes feel that way, and it may be that way, but I think if you do want to go on to get a PhD, it should be something that you are doing because you really want to, and or you really need to. And I could go into why that is later, but I just kind of wanted to share some of my experiences on a road to a PhD in a life sciences program. So I know for some of you that I've talked to are in education, and the pathway for you might be very different. Some things overlap. Really more of a just sort of how I've handled things and sort of some tips that I think have been helpful for me that aren't necessarily even related to just a PhD program or just being in STEM. So one other thing that I wanted to ask, for those of you who are in grad school, where did you go to undergrad?
I went to Syracuse University.
Syracuse?
I went to North Carolina A&T.
North Carolina A&T?
UNC Greensboro.
Greensboro?
Virginia State University.
Virginia State. Okay, so we have some, where'd you go?
I went to Howard.
Howard, okay, so we got some HBCU alums in the house, okay. So, I will say, this was already talked about, but this is sort of my path. Starting in Atlanta, moving to Pittsburgh, and I'm originally from California, from San Diego. I grew up thinking that I was from a very diverse place. My pediatrician was black, my dentist was black. I didn't have very many black teachers, but I had a lot of non-white teachers growing up, and most of my friends were sort of a mix of folks. So it wasn't until I got to Atlanta that I was like, oh, San Diego is not very diverse. It was 7% black, about 25% Hispanic, and to be right above the Mexican border is sort of impressive to have such a low number of Mexican population. So I can sort of tell you about my transition going to an HBCU, and it wasn't actually a cultural shock. The cultural shock came when I moved to Pittsburgh, sort of back into a more white space, and feeling sort of out of my element a little bit, and feeling like I was always having to explain myself to my peers. When someone would ask me where I went to undergrad, and I would tell them Spelman, oh, I've never heard of that school before. Oh, I haven't heard of your school either. So, I mean, here we are. We're confused. Or, you know, I was very involved in a Black graduate student organization when I went to the University of Pittsburgh. I found it immediately because I was like, I need to be connected to my people. And some of my classmates asked me, well, why does this organization exist? You know, how would you feel if I was in a white graduate student organization? And I said, oh, you mean the student government that's here? Okay, so I always felt like I was being questioned, and I felt alone and isolated a lot of the times, and it made doing the work difficult. And I think it's great that you, for those of you who are in graduate school, are in graduate school in a place where hopefully you're feeling nurtured and mentored and not feeling alone or feeling isolated, but it may feel like that when you go into the workplace, maybe when you go to a conference. My professional society, the Society for Neuroscience, when I was in graduate school, you could shoot a cannon at the conference, and there's 30,000 people that go to this conference every year. You could shoot a cannon and not hit a person of color, let alone a person who is also black. And most of the black students and faculty that I saw were oftentimes men. So I felt like a double minority. It's gotten a lot better now. I remember going to these conferences and I'd be walking up and down the aisles of the convention, big exhibit hall, looking at posters. And when I would see someone who was black or brown, it was like I would just try to get closer to them. And maybe they'll notice me, and then we can be friends forever. And we'll see each other every time we come to this conference. And that's sort of how I approach my networking. You're black or you're brown, I'm black. We gotta be friends. We have to be connected to each other. And that's how I did grow a lot of my professional contacts, just because, not that I didn't feel comfortable interacting in other spaces, but it's just different when you're not always explaining yourself to someone. And that made the transition much easier for me. But I think sort of the thing about graduate school is, even though I had supportive mentors who appreciated that I was, not that I was different, but that I had different struggles and that I had different things that I cared about, and they tried to make sure that they knew that I could come to them if I needed them. And also, like, how can I help you do whatever it is that you need to do on top of the academic part? So I'm taking classes, I'm doing research. Seemingly that should happen without, you know, outside biases, but research is research, right? We bring ourselves into the things that we do, be it in the classroom or in the work that we do, and we shouldn't have to separate ourselves. So going from grad school to a postdoc, it was really important for me to figure out how I bring myself into the spaces that I go into. That I am not just Dr. Matthews with a neuroscience degree, but that I am Dr. Matthews, a black woman neuroscientist who has a breadth of experiences, interests outside of just my research, and that people respect that. And I didn't know how to do that, but I wanted to do that. I was tired of always having to feel small in big spaces, or feel small in spaces where I was one of the only people that looked like me, and that it was okay to speak up about whatever it was. If I had an idea about how the dopamine system works in the brain, that I didn't feel like I had to shrink down because I didn't want to draw attention to myself. Or the opposite, when I was saying something about diversity or inclusion type of work, that I didn't feel like I had to shrink because I was afraid of what people would say. Like, oh, she always plays the race card, or she's always bringing this up. So it took some time to figure that out. And now that I'm at the NIH, our transition from being a fellow to being a contractor for NIH, and we'll be switching back to being a federal employee, hopefully in 3 weeks, working for another place at NIH. But NIH was the first time that I have walked into meetings, literally sat at the table, and I was not the only person that looked like me. But there were other black women in the room, or other brown women in the room, not just male dominated, and that when I spoke, people listened and valued the things that I had to say. And that was really affirming, but it took to be in my 30s for that to happen. And sometimes that just can make you feel sort of like, well, I have all this education, I have all this greatness, I'm just a good person, people like me, I'm sometimes funny, I can relate to people, I like talking, and for the first time I felt like the things that I said, someone that wasn't my friend or my mom or my dad were like, yeah, that's a good point, or that's a really interesting thing to say. So I had a really good experience coming to NIH in terms of the work that I've been able to do. I don't know if you caught anything that was in the bio, and I guess I didn't write the bio to be read, or to be heard, I wrote it to be read. But essentially what I do at the NIH is I study people like you in this room, how you get to your career path, what happens when you're getting your education, being able to support programs that help, particularly those who are studying the health sciences, not so much outside of that, not even really STEM education, unfortunately, but who is doing research, who is getting into this career, and how do we provide other resources to get there? So be it at undergraduate level, at the graduate level, if you're getting a master's, if you're getting a PhD, if you've already gotten a PhD and you're doing further research as a postdoctoral fellow, how can we help you get to the next level? Do you have the resources you need? Not just to do research, but do you have the resources to be a professional? Do you have enough family leave time if you decide to start a family, or if someone in your family gets sick? And oftentimes, strangely enough, there have not been policies in place to allow for someone receiving NIH funding to have time off to take care of the family, or even have enough money to live off of. So that's a lot of the things that I have worked on at NIH, and I will be going to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, and that will focus more on programs to get more underrepresented minorities, or individuals from underrepresented groups into having funding to be able to do research. So, I'm trying to think what else I really want to tell you guys. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what's next, not just for me, but for anyone. So a lot of times when I was in grad school, and even in undergrad at Spelman, it was, well, what are we going to do next? Like, what can I do with this degree? And it felt so, I don't know, being in science was a little different because, you know, if you want to be a doctor, you go to med school. You want to be a lawyer, you go to law school. You like science, what do? Do you get a PhD? Do you become a teacher? Do you, like, what are the options? And it actually never felt like it was laid out. So I thought a lot about how do I prepare myself the best for a degree or a profession that I don't even know I want. So how many in here are doing what they thought they would do, say, at the age of 15? So like freshman in high school. That's really impressive. Good job, guys. Congratulations. That is amazing. I was 28 years old when I figured out what I thought I wanted to do. I'm kind of doing it, getting closer to things that I like, but I never really had a profession that I wanted. I just wanted to be great. That was sort of where I was. Dad went to college, he went to Howard, Bison, very, very disappointed that I went to Spelman. Yeah, for those of you who are Howard alum, I feel like you all feel that way about any of your friends that did not go to Howard. But he was college educated, went to Howard Medical School. I didn't want to be a doctor because I didn't want to be like my dad, but I was really smart, straight A student in middle school and high school, did really well. But I wasn't one of those students who's like, well, I'm really smart, so I can go off and be aerospace engineer. It was like, well, I will go to college and I will study something that I like, probably hopefully do well in, and then I will get a job. indiscriminate job, just J-O-B, that was the title of the job. And I will make money, I will find a husband, I will have kids, and I will live happily ever after. And it mostly happened that way, except the husband and kids part, but on my 50-year plan. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so, funny enough, what I do is helping people figure out what they want to do. Because it was really stressful for me not having a plan and not having someone to tell me like, well, you should at least work towards this, and even if the plan changes, at least you have something that you're working towards. And I never really was working towards anything until seriously the age of 28 years old when I applied for this. Well, I went on to Oregon to do a postdoc, and it took me 4 years to get to where I thought I wanted to be. But I do think about what's next and how I can be helpful to somebody. So if it's introducing you to someone who's doing the job that you want to do, or maybe you're interested in doing, you're a teacher and you want to get your kids connected with whatever, making sure that you have the connections to make those things happen. So I do a lot of work with that, and that's really mostly because I just was doing it because I was curious about, like, well, what do we do next? How do we get there? And I've sort of made a career out of it. So I have no real advice on how to get to where you are on personal experience. It's really more like, don't do what I did. And that's what I tell most of my mentees, and they're doing fabulous. So it's really easy to do as I say, not as I do, or not as I did. But those are things that I think about. What's next? Not just professionally, but personally. How do you take care of yourself? How do you make sure that in a rigorous academic program or in a rigorous profession that you are able to take care of yourself first and then take care of the other things that are around you? So I'll sort of skip past some of this other stuff that I'm happy to talk about later if anyone is interested. But these are some of the things that I've already described. And I don't think that these are exclusive to me as a Black woman, but they really felt amplified. After I graduated with my PhD, I had insomnia for probably 4 months. I couldn't sleep past 4 a.m. It didn't matter what time I went to bed. Go to bed at 9 o'clock, seems reasonable to get up at 4 o'clock, maybe you only need 7 hours of sleep. I can go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. I wake up at 4 o'clock every morning thinking about all the things that I didn't do in my PhD program, or they gave me this PhD, I didn't really earn it, they just wanted to get rid of me. And I almost thought about not going to my graduation because I didn't feel like I had earned it. So it took a whole year. I graduated, I defended in July, I graduated I went to commencement in April. But it took me a long time, and part of it is because of all of these things. And I had very supportive parents. I had a few friends who were also Black women getting their PhDs in STEM, and I still struggled with thinking that I wasn't enough, that I was an imposter, and that someone would find out that while I have a PhD, I have this degree, but I didn't really earn it. How did we figure it out? No idea. It didn't make sense, but that's how it felt. And so it crippled me in many ways, and it took a long time. A couple of years later, where I finally started going to therapy and working through some of the issues that I had, some control issues that I had, some other things. So feeling alone and isolated, and I think a lot of PhDs also experience this across racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. But I did feel like it was me. Like I'm the Black student, so I'm probably the only one who feels like that, and I can't tell anybody that I feel this way because then they'll know, or then their suspicions about me being from the school they've never heard of was right, that I'm not really as smart as I think that I am. Not having the answers, and I have answers in quotations because I don't know what questions I thought I was trying to answer. But I didn't have the answers, not to my experiments, not to anything, and that was very frustrating, thinking that I needed these answers to these metaphysical sort of questions. Understanding and coping with failure. I think failure is seen as a bad thing, and I thought it was a bad thing, that if you failed, my experiments failed, I didn't do well on a test, that spoke directly to me as a person. And I really had to redefine what failure meant and how to use failure. We can talk a little bit more about that later. but also asking for help was sort of coupled with this. There were a lot of things that I was struggling with. I was one of the only people in my lab, so I studied the brain, understanding how certain chemicals work in the brain when you're an adolescent. So many of you may know adolescents are more susceptible to psychiatric disorders, drug abuse, and we don't really understand why. So I wanted to study what was going on in the brain at that age. And it required doing certain types of experiments, very meticulous, like literally doing brain surgery, non-humans. And the techniques that I was using were very sensitive, and I was the only person in the lab doing it. Everybody else was doing a different hard technique. I was doing this hard technique that nobody else was doing. So when it failed, I didn't have anyone to say, well, hey, did you get this thing to work, or how do you do this? It was me all by myself. But instead of saying to my mentor, hey, I'm having an issue with this, I tried to troubleshoot everything on my own. Tried to constantly do things, figure it out for myself. Because again, I felt like I needed to have the answers of whatever that means, and I couldn't accept failure. Like, it can't be a failure, I have to figure this out. And it was a waste of time, a huge waste of time for not asking for help, and being vulnerable enough to say, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm really struggling, I need somebody to help me out. I've really gotten better with this within the last year, so again, this is all, these epiphanies didn't happen all at once, but I'm getting better at asking for help in any facet of life. And then giving myself permission to be authentically me. So not wearing big hoop earrings to lab, because I was like, again, I didn't want to be the black girl, or listening to the music that I like, always feeling I had to assimilate into whatever culture was with the people that I wanted instead of having them assimilate to me. And it wasn't until sort of the end of my graduate career that I had students tell me that came into the lab like, it's so cool to have met you because you are just you. And that's cool. And while somewhat vague, it also really made me feel good that just someone seeing me be whatever they think that I am, and seeming to be comfortable in that made a huge difference. So has anybody struggled with any of these things? Anybody still struggling with these things? And I'm happy to talk sort of about some anecdotal things of maybe how you overcome that or how you deal with it. Again, I don't think any of this necessarily ever goes away. I heard someone say, a woman at a women's luncheon that I attended at my last professional society conference, she said, if you don't feel like an imposter, you're probably not doing your work right. Everybody is faking this. We all think that we know what we're doing, and that's okay to think that you know what you're doing. But when you get so confident that you think that your way is the only way, then that's when there's probably a disconnect. And that was sort of affirming for me because while I feel like sometimes I'm just like doing my own thing, people think I have it together, like, oh, I want to be like you, I want to be like you, Dr. Matthews, when I grow up, and I'm like, aim higher. But then when I like look back over my CV, I read letters from students that I talk to about thanking me for the advice I've given them, I'm like, I'm bad. Like, I have been doing my thing for a while now. And usually if you do it with confidence, you know what they say, like, just whatever it is that you're doing, do it with confidence, no one will even know. And it's true. No one knows that I've been fumbling my way through adulthood in general all these years. But I've certainly found ways to make myself feel better about faking it, and also in a way that I think is constructive and not destructive. I think we have a lot of other things to worry about in this world, and being worried that we don't know everything, we're not doing everything as elegantly as we shouldn't be one of the things that weigh us down. So here are a few, I call them pro tips. And certainly not necessarily to getting a PhD. These are things while I learned getting a PhD, but they certainly apply, I think, to any facet of life. Just being awesome. And I think the most important thing, especially as you're figuring things out in terms of a career path, is defining what success looks like for you. Your definition of success should not necessarily look like the person sitting next to you. It shouldn't look like the person who's 3 years ahead of you in your program. And it doesn't even have to be more advanced or different than someone who's first starting out in the program. You decide what success is. If success is getting a PhD, then get a PhD. succeed in that. If entering a PhD program and leaving that PhD program because it is not fulfilling you and you are not getting what you want from it, that is not failure. That is saying, hey, this isn't for me, I need to move on to something else. And removing yourself from a situation that is not good is success. So building resilience, learning what failure is, and being comfortable with failure. Maybe it's a teaching moment, maybe you just really screwed up. Maybe you made a huge mistake. That is also fine. You can't learn, take it from a neuroscience, you cannot learn if you do not make mistakes, if you do not fail, if you do not face fear. It's just impossible. Establishing relationships with good mentors. How many in here have a mentor? Okay, everybody in this room should be raising their hand. And the mentor doesn't have to be someone who is your academic advisor, someone who is looking over, checking off your schedule, helping you with research if you're doing research, or if you're in a master's program, helping you do your thesis. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. Hopefully you have one of those. But I mean people who believe in you and are willing to help you with your goals. Whether or not they're in your same profession or not, whether or not they're at UDC, whether or not they're at your undergraduate institution, you should have people who want to help you and are in a position to help you, whether that's connecting you with somebody else, like, hey, oh, so you want to be in this program, or you want to get a job working for Google, you have no tech experience, I'm going to introduce you to somebody who works at Google who had no tech experience. That is someone who can be a mentor to you, or this is what you need to do if you want to break into this industry, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Or it can just be someone who supports you in your pursuits. But you should always have multiple mentors. They can last you for a 10-minute coffee conversation. They can last you 10 years. But they should be people who are willing to help you. To some degree, have some investment in you. So hopefully you're meeting people who you can have relationships with long term. But even if it's somebody you email once a year, hey, just wanted to let you know, I got that scholarship you helped me with, thank you so much, this is what I'm doing. As someone who has mentored students, one of my mentees who's a PhD student, she's 40. So she's older than I am. But she is, I call her my daughter because I nag her, like, you need to send me this, you need to do this, you said you were gonna send me this. Mind you, she lives in New York, I live here, I have nothing to do with her program. But she said, I wanna do this, this, and this, and I said, okay, well, I'm gonna help you do this, this, and this, so you owe me assignments for us to get you from point A to point B. She doesn't send me her assignment, knock, knock. And by knock, knock, I mean text message. You owe me something, I need you to send me that something. Okay, you owe me something. Okay, I'm gonna get it to you. What's my deadline? Deadline is the end of the year, January 1st. Where's my assignment? I need that assignment. So I jokingly say that I'm her mom because I nag her like my mother nags me. But we aren't the same age, we're at different stages in our life, but she's at an earlier stage in her career than I am, and we still have a working relationship. So it doesn't have to always be someone older than you, it doesn't even have to be someone, again, it's your same institution, but it should be someone who is invested in you. And ask them for what you want. If you need someone who's going to help you get your assignments turned in, or it's going to be someone to help you get those chapters turned in for your dissertation, find someone who's going to do that. It could be a friend, it could be a peer mentor. You all in this room can mentor each other, and I know you've been talking about mentorship throughout the series, so you should constantly be building those relationships. And that will help you become a better mentor, so you know what you want from someone else and how they can help you advance, and you can do the same for someone else. And it's never too late. You can be a first year in a program, first year undergraduate. You can mentor your peers, you can mentor students who are in high school, etc. Be curious and be picky. Has anybody told you that you should apply to a school because of its rankings and that you shouldn't, I don't know, you should not want to go to Syracuse, New York because it's really cold? Or like, oh, that's a stupid reason not to go to a school. A lot of people told me that my standards for programs were ridiculous because I did not want to go to X place. I didn't want to go to the Midwest. It's too cold in the Midwest. And my dad even told me that he thought it was ridiculous that I wouldn't consider a school because I didn't want to be cold. Well, I will be miserable. How am I going to do well somewhere where I don't think that I will do well there? So I think it's okay to be picky. It could be something like that. It could be, I really don't think I would get along with that professor, so I would rather not be in a situation where I'm beholden to them. I think it's okay to make those decisions as long as you're making them for decisions that work well with your definition of success. What is going to help you succeed? And you should make all of your choices based on that definition. But be open. So if that program is in North Dakota, but they have the best program, could you deal with the cold? Maybe. Think about it. Be open to trying new things. And invest in yourself. Self-care, I know it seems like a buzzword, but it's true. Taking care of yourself. Has anyone flown on a plane before? At least once in their life? I don't think the message has changed in the 30 plus years I've been on this earth, but the flight attendant always says that if the oxygen masks fall from the compartments, they tell you to put the mask on yourself first, and then help someone else, be it a child, maybe someone who isn't able to do for themselves. And that's because you can't help anybody if you're dead. If you're not breathing, you can't help anybody. So if you are not well, you can't help anybody else. You can't do your work well. You can't be a good friend, a good child, a good parent, a good spouse, a good student, a good mentor, a good teacher, a good professional, if you are not well. And that doesn't have to be, going on vacation once a month, but it might be taking a trip to, mine is getting manicure every other week. It could be going to the spa, or it could just be sitting at home watching the Fire Festival documentary on Netflix. It could be anything. But you decide what that looks like for you, but make sure that your wellness is a priority. And I guarantee that will permeate into other aspects of your life. But also investing in you can mean professionally. Coming to these sorts of things, meeting people, talking with people, finding out what skills you want to build, what skills you need to get to the next level, and maybe just sharpening the skills that you already have. I take a emotional IQ workshop. I try to do that at least once a year. Also resume writing. I've submitted so many resumes. I probably could teach the workshop on resume writing, but I go to workshops anyway because things change. Careers change, hiring managers change, what they're looking for changes, and I want to be up on it so that if I were to come back here and give you all a resume workshop, I'm not giving you a resume workshop from 1990. That is irrelevant. The material doesn't matter. So you want to keep sharpening the skills that you have, and thinking about ways that you're going to improve yourself, make yourself the best you, again, for whatever success is for you. If it's getting a job in your field, getting tenured faculty, applying to a PhD program after you finish a master's program, you should constantly be thinking of ways to improve yourself. So that's sort of my spiel. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, or even if you want to talk, sort of have, get some feedback from other folks in the room of what you're going through, we can workshop some things that you might be going through.
I'm just looking for more research opportunities with internships. I'm actually trying to go business track.
Okay.
So,
Are you an undergrad here at UDC?
well, I'm actually doing my associate's degree first.
Okay. So, is anybody here faculty that has a research lab? So, after I want you to talk to her. But, so what kind of research do you want to do?
Anything with biomedical science.
Anything with biomedical science? So she's really the person you want to talk to. So I will give you some general advice in terms of going about that. Just ask, hey, I'm sure there's a directory of folks at UDC or at Howard or at, what's across the street? American, any of the universities that you can get yourself to physically. Look at their website, look at who's doing what kind of research, and then send them an email. Hi, Dr. So-and-so, or Professor so-and-so, whatever their title is, and they have a PhD called doctor. Some people are weirdly attached to their titles. And not weirdly, I shouldn't say that. I got my degree, I was afraid of it for a little while, and then it was like, no, you don't call me Dr. Matthews. You call me Marguerite, or you call me Dr. Matthews. You won't call me Miss Matthews, because I know you see this PhD at the end of my name. So you will send them an email saying, good afternoon or good morning, Dr. So-and-so. I see that you do research on aging in mice that have nicotine use. I think this is really interesting, whether you think it's interesting or not. But if it's interesting enough for you to want to do research in that lab, I think this is interesting. Would you mind if we had a chance to talk about a research experience? Most researchers are happy to, one, talk about their research, and two, if they have an opportunity, even if it's volunteer work, especially if they don't have to pay you, to let you in their lab and help them do their work. Because most professors, at big universities anyway, a lot of times don't do the research on their own. They need other people working for them. So they're oftentimes, not always, very happy to have someone come in and do work on a project. And it can start off something simple where you're just maybe shadowing somebody, but it could turn into a bigger project. But just ask. Never be afraid to ask. And go meet with somebody. Hey, can I come to your office and talk with you about such and such? If you know a grad student or someone who's doing research in a lab, ask them, hey, are there any opportunities in your lab to do some research? And sometimes cold calls really do work. You don't have to be in a program. You don't necessarily have to have your bachelor's yet. Right where you are, you can already start. You already know at least one person that's physically here that you can talk to today about opportunities with her. And she probably knows other faculty at UDC or elsewhere who might actually be looking for someone like, hey, I'm really looking for a lab tech who can do X, Y, Z. Send me their resume or send me their names. So just don't be afraid to ask. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you first, Dr. Matthews, for being here. You are a godsend. I'm so serious. Like, you're on time. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
First is, do you have any opportunities or know any opportunities for non-traditional Black and brown women, i.e. myself, to stay in school who are having financial hardship? And do you know of a path or networking system for undergrads coming from a HBCU with a PhD program is allotted for neuroscience, particularly the medical, which I would like to be, I aspire to be a orthomolecular psychiatrist, not psychologist. Our program here at UBC supports the clinical psychotherapy, but I'm headed in the other direction. So do you have any knowing directions, pointers, people?
So I will say I don't know a lot about non-traditional students, at least in this area. When I lived in Portland, I did a lot of work with the Portland State University, which had a lot of commuter students. They called them commuter students, but mostly students who did not come straight from high school. So I don't know a lot about programs here, but, and I don't say this to be dismissive, Google exactly what it is that you're looking for in terms of scholarships. There are, I know of a ton of scholarships, at least certainly in Portland, some of them were local, but there are a lot of states have opportunities for non-traditional students or students who are Black and brown. I don't know so much about this area, just I haven't gotten as, I'm not as aware just because I don't have as, I'm not as, I don't work as directly with academic institutions here as I did previously. But I'm positive that there are things out there. And if it's a question of maybe talking to somebody that you know that's faculty here or an academic advisor to try to see if you can create an application that's going to be strong and receive the funding. So I'm sure it can be difficult. The financial burden of education is hard for everybody, but probably certainly people who have lived a life and have possibly other things going on where they're not just in school all the time. That's how I went to school. I was in school all the time. I was on work study. So to your second question, we can definitely talk afterwards, but because I don't know much about programs specifically for the thing that you're looking for, but I'm certainly happy to connect with you afterwards so we can talk about ways that we can sort of come up with a plan for going for that. And also thank you for being here and asking those questions. Again, asking for help. Sometimes it just puts it out there, and hopefully if there's anybody else who's maybe thinking along the same lines can connect with you and brainstorm. Does anybody know, is anybody else here a non-traditional student? Do you know of any types of scholarships or financial opportunities that she could take advantage of?
Like, do you work full-time? I work full-time and I go to school full-time.
talk afterwards.
Yeah.
Let's exchange it.
Actually, have you heard about the Herb Block scholarship? Are you a 4-year or 2-year?
4 years.
There's like a plethora of scholarships that you could just on the UDC webpage. I don't know if you've tried scholarships. No.
Are they not, do you not qualify or?
I don't qualify.
Okay.
Mostly scholarships that unfortunately link to our institution are for, not of my age bracket.
Right, okay.
Or of my year of tenure, or they have been already exhausted.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, yeah, hopefully she will be another good resource for you. Any other questions, concerns? Is there anything that someone's struggling with that they just need another ear to hear about?
I'm glad that you mentioned about therapy, because I was at, and I'm not saying this most to brag, but I was at everything, and then life happened,
Oh, yeah.
and I plummeted. So I was there. So I went from being just on roll to flunking. Well, almost flunking out. But I was like, how I can't go back. But I encourage anyone who has a life circumstance that happens to speak. And I always didn't understand, and I say this aloud. In psychology, our gatekeepers say, as psychology, if we aspire to be healers, we need